Greetings, true believers, and welcome back to Unrepentant Geeking, the show where a geek can be a geek. I'm your host, Shaun, and at long last, it's time to tackle the reviews of the Secret Wars tie-ins for June 2015. This is a bit overdue, you might say, and all I can answer is, well, June and July, they're busy times of the year for we geeks. There's so much going on, and, I have a life of my own, too. I'm allowed to have my own life, damn it! Sorry. That was unprofessional of me. It will probably happen again. Hey, you knew what you were signing up for. Seriously, though, let's just get all the nonsense out of the way, get straight to the reviews. We've got a number of titles from June tying into the big Secret Wars event. If you haven't been following my coverage, first of all, you should go back and watch the previous episode of Unrepentant Geeking dedicated to Secret Wars, because that's where I go into a lot of details about the event. But the basics are, the Marvel Universe as we know it has ended. All is now Doom. Doom is the ruler of all that is. He is the ruler of a place known as Battle World, which is made up of the bits and pieces from surviving bits and pieces, I might say, of various universes from throughout the former Marvel Universe. So, this is the point where we pick up, and mostly, a lot of these tie-ins, they all deal with different areas and different events going on around Battle World. So, that's the long and short of it. I'm going to now jump into the stuff. Now, I have read now, by this point, a lot of July stuff. I'm going to do my best not to address that directly. This is just talking about the June issues, the June tie-ins, which there are less of than were originally solicited because of delays of the main book, and as we will get into for the July reviews, there's a reason the delay of the main book is delaying some of the tie-ins. That's all I'll say. And as for the main book, we got issue 3 in June, and basically this was the issue where things start to pick up in terms of plot, where we start to get a sense of where all this is going. Issue 4 took that even further, but I'll get into that more in July. Secret Wars continues to be just one of the best Marvel events ever so far. 4 issues in, remarkable book. I'm enjoying the hell out of it, even if you don't normally go into events. If you like the Marvel Universe at all, if you like any aspect of it, I can't recommend enough you check out the main Secret Wars book. It is well worth the read, and it is fairly self-contained, or at least as self-contained as any book can be that is the culmination of 10 years of work from the writer. Still, if you get Secret Wars 0, which is free right now on Comixology, because it's the free comic book day issue, so you can go get it digitally if you don't have it, physically, even if you're a physical collector, or if you find it at a comic book store. If you get Secret Wars 0, you'll get fairly well caught up on what happened, and then you can start in on 1, and you should be golden. But there are a lot of tie-ins, and that's where I come in. I'm now going to review the first couple issues of all the tie-ins launching in June. I already covered stuff in May. I'm going to check back in with books once they end and give my overall opinion. That's how I decided to handle it. So I'm not going to really talk about the second issues for books that came out in June. I will say, just real quick, Spider-Verse got a little bit better. It started to gain a bit of a focus. Still not a great book, but okay, it's not as weird and off-putting. And as for Ultimate End, I am getting the distinct impression somebody didn't tell Brian Michael Bendis how this whole Battle World thing is supposed to work. Between this and other stuff he's doing, there's like a weird disconnect in his books and everything else, and maybe it's just the editor going, well, it's Brian Michael Bendis, I can't tell him what to do. I don't know, it's weird. I think at this point, yeah, there's no way I could judge whether or not Ultimate End's going to be good until I get to the final issue. So, anyways, that's enough of all that. Let's launch into the books that launched in June, connected to Secret Wars. Sarah, especially in this different setting, and it's kind of interesting, although they definitely underplay the fact that she's transgender in a time when, oh boy, that was not a good thing. I don't know. This just didn't quite have the same spark as the main series did. It was fine. Like I said, if you've been reading Angela, you'll enjoy this. But if you haven't, this is not where I would recommend you get started. I would recommend go back and read the main series first. That will prepare you a lot more for this, because there's the characters don't translate quite as well, and there's some attempt at backstory and information, but it'll be very oblique if you don't already read Angela. The story is okay. We seem to be being set up for some interesting potential stuff, but it's too soon to say whether or not this will be a good story in and of its own right. Not everything works when translated into a different universe or to a different setting, and I don't know. This just didn't quite work for me. Wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. It was merely okay. Alright, next up we have what turned out to be, for me, one of the big surprises of the month. That is Age of Ultron versus Marvel Zombies, from James Robinson on writing duties and Steve Pugh as artist. And yeah, I've not been shy in the past about my mixed feelings about Marvel Zombies. I'm not a fan of the good guys going bad in general, and this has pretty much become the prototypical example of that. Now, Likar has been covering the whole Marvel Zombie saga this month, with his special Long Box of the Damned in July, and he's been reminding me that actually they managed to do a pretty big epic saga, and they really, really ran the Marvel Zombie things into the ground. But there have been some good stuff. Like, I will admit, I really enjoyed the Marvel Zombies Halloween special, but that was because it wasn't really about the zombies. It was about two characters who I won't spoil who they were, living in the aftermath of all that, and it was a really strong character piece. So, I suppose my problem with the Marvel Zombies is when we focus on the heroes as zombies, instead of giving us other characters to focus on as central figures. And maybe that was why I'm surprised, but I actually really enjoyed Age of Ultron versus Marvel Zombies. Basically, the setup is that, if you don't know, Age of Ultron was the fairly mediocre event for a few years back where we get to see a future where Ultron took over and, of course, it made everything into machine and is obsessed with perfection. And in Battle World, both the Deadlands and the land of Ultron exist next to each other beyond the wall, where the shield wall, where they're cut off from the rest of the world because they would destroy everything in their path. And obviously Ultron is less than pleased with the idea of zombies because they're rotting, disgusting things, and he is all about perfection and all about doing away with the ways of the flesh, as it were. So actually the concept of Ultron hating the Marvel Zombies and being locked in current combat is a kind of interesting setup. But what's really good is, as it turns out, our focal character is none other than Hank Pym, who, as you know, created Ultron. But not just any Hank Pym. It's a version of Hank Pym from the Wild Wild West Marvel Universe, the book that was originally supposed to be launching this month, but was supposed to launch in June, but then got pushed back to July. So that's a little awkward, but you don't need to read it to understand what's going on. Basically, this is a Wild West version of Hank Pym. And the first half of the issue, we get the basic setup, we get the backstory for this version of Ultron, we get to see some of the zombies in action, and the rest is all about Hank. And yeah, this is a much better read than I thought it was. Hank makes, for the few pages where once he comes in, he makes for a seemingly interesting lead, and the last page promises some fun stuff, potentially, including a version of a character who's one of my absolute favorites. So, yeah, color me surprised. I really actually enjoyed Age of Ultron versus Marvel Zombies, and I'm looking forward to reading the rest of this, and I cannot believe I just said that, because I will tell you, I got real tired of Marvel Zombies, and I never thought Age of Ultron was any good. But I guess that's what happens when you bring on a writer like James Robinson. He definitely has created an interesting setup, and I'm curious to see where we go from here. I would definitely give this one a recommendation if you're looking for a lot of, ultra-violence and rotting, decaying flesh. If you like the horror side of Marvel, you'll probably enjoy this. If you like just rollicking, ridiculous action, you'll enjoy this. So, by all means, if Age of Ultron versus Marvel Zombies sounds like a concept you would like, I suspect you'll really enjoy this. And even if it's not, you might want to give this first issue a try. Like me, you could be surprised. So, next we come up to one of the more, shall we say, controversial books of Secret Wars, namely Amazing Spider-Man Renew Your Vows, #1, written by, of course, Dan Slott, pencils by Adam Kubert. So, this is the book where asks, what if Peter Parker had stayed married, had actually gotten married? What if the whole effing awful bullshit that was One More Day and all that crap, what if it never happened? What if he'd actually stayed married to MJ? What if they'd had a girl? What if the Spider-Man universe was a lot better place than it is right now? Yeah, I said it. I went there. And basically what we have here is interesting, because this is actually, in a lot of ways, this first issue of Renew Your Vows is a prologue to where the rest of the series is going to be going. It's basically the last day of Spider-Man and the last day of heroes in the Regency, which is this particular section of of Battle World. We see how this fell, and we see how everything went wrong, and we see what was supposed to be, what ended up being the last day of Peter Parker as Spider-Man. And it's interesting because what motivates him to drop the suit, what motivates him to look beyond, he still thinks about power and responsibility, but now he feels like only his responsibility is to his family, and to his daughter, and to his wife, and he gives up being Peter. And without getting into too much details, the rest of the heroes of this section get taken out, and we see the actual fight that ends his career, as it were. Obviously, next issue we're going to see him forced, the last couple pages of this issue jump ahead a few years, and that's basically now in Battle World. And clearly the main thrust of the series is going to be seeing Peter forced to become Spider-Man again and all that. But as for this first issue, this was pretty good, actually. And I know, look, I like Dan Slott a great deal as a writer. I think his Silver Surfer run, for example, has been one of the absolute best takes on the character ever created. Now, admittedly, it's an unabashed knockoff in some ways. It takes a lot of inspiration from Doctor Who, and he's been very upfront about that. But it's not just Doctor Who clone, and he really does have a strong handle on the character. And he has produced some very good Spider-Man stories over the years, especially like before the One More Day everything. Like, I still love the Spider-Man Human Torch mini he did that traced the friendship and relationship between Peter and Johnny over the years. Still one of my favorite Spider-Man stories. But yeah, I've been saying for years he needs to get off the book. He's done... Spider-Verse should have been the end. And unfortunately, if you don't know, he's going to be continuing writing Amazing Spider-Man into the all-new, all-different Marvel, and the new setup for Peter is going to be really painful. Some of us held out the slightest hope that maybe Renew Your Vows was going to end with Peter having, a wife and kid again, and things would be good, and that's how we do it, and maybe Miles would be the young one, and no, Peter's not going to be married to MJ. He's going to basically be James Bond post Secret Wars, and I'm like, oh god, I really don't want to see that. But regardless, I do think he's burned out on telling Spider-Man, but it looks like he has one good Spider-Man story left in him, at least, so far, and that makes sense. This is kind of the Dark Knight Returns of Spider-Man. Now, that idea was actually done a few years back. I'm blanking on what it was called. It was an okay series, but it was so... It didn't capture the spirit of Spider-Man. This feels like, no, the Dark Knight Returns of Spider-Man would have Spider-Man be retiring for family. He wouldn't just be quitting. No, it would take something like that to knock him out of what he sees as his responsibility. That makes sense, actually, that he would retire for his family and then be thrust back into it unwillingly. To me, that does make sense if you were going to do like a this is the last Spider-Man story. That is kind of the way I would do it. And the setup, the explanation for why Peter quits makes a lot of sense, and it feels in character for him, and the new baddie who we're getting introduced to seems, well, I can't say he seems that interesting, but he looks like he could make a decent foe. I don't know, he's a new character, so I would kind of thought that you might want to do Norman Osborn, and maybe it will turn out to be Norman Osborn. I don't know, he's called the Regent, and apparently there's some secret to his identity, so I suspect he'll turn out to be somebody who Peter knew. Regardless, this was pretty good. I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding Dan Slott and Spider-Man and all that, and I'm right there with you on a lot of it, and I get why this might kind of feel like, just scraping the wound, and I get that, but if you treat this as a what-if, if you treat this as its own thing, it's well done. It is legitimately well done. The art is lovely, the writing is strong, and for the first issue at least, it works. I mean, at one point it seems like he's going to damsel MJ, and he does slightly, but then MJ gets, she gets her own back, as it were, and that's all I'll say, and yeah, I'm curious to see where this goes, and I'm curious to see if it has any kind of impact post-Secret Wars, but even if it doesn't, this is shaping up to be a decent story in its own right. So, if that annoys you, if you're frustrated that I actually said I liked a Dan Slott Spider-Man comic, all I can say is, deal with it. I'm not here to appease anybody. I'm just here to give my honest opinion. And my honest opinion is, if you like Spider-Man, I think you will like Renew Your Vows. Alright, next up we have Armor Wars from writer James Robinson and artist Markio Takara. I hope I'm not butchering that name too badly. Now, do not let the name fool you. This does not actually have anything really to do with the classic 80s event where Tony Stark went around destroying all versions of his technology that were in the hands of others and all that. A really good classic Iron Man story. No, this is something fairly different. The setup is that it's set in the domain of Technopolis, which is like one of the more advanced areas on Battleworld. And it's also a place where, due to a dangerous virus that spread amongst the population, everyone has to live 24/7 in armor, in Iron Man style armor. Everyone. In order to stay alive. So basically, it's a city of Iron Men, and that's a unique concept. And overall, this is a really strong, fun Elseworlds style story. Now, there are some elements of Battleworld in here. Basically, in this, Tony Stark is the Baron of Technopolis, but he's in constant competition with his twin brother Arno, who is a character who has shown up in various forms in Iron Man lore over the years. Most recently, the long and short story of it is that, as it turns out, Tony Stark was adopted by his parents and is not technically blood related to them because they had another son originally who, due to all sorts of conditions, was going to be taken by an alien and had this whole thing. Look, it's actually a pretty good story. I know it sounds a bit wonky, but it really works when you actually sit down and read it. None of that, again, has much to do with this. In this, Tony and Arno are brothers. Arno is the bad brother. Tony is the good brother. Arno works with the Kingpin and other criminals, and he wants to take down Tony, while Tony's just trying to keep Technopolis going, especially because he has vague memories of things not always being this way, which is a sign of, Battleworld is kind of weird, because Battleworld's existed for 8 years, and yet people have memories going back hundreds of years, or that's just all they remember, and it's the weirdness of what's happened in the wake of Secret Wars, basically. None of that is particularly relevant. In this, we open with the Spider-Man of Technopolis, who has armor and all that stuff, uncovering a dangerous secret and getting killed for it. And meanwhile, the friends and family of Tony Stark, who were close to this kid, who it turns out was Spider-Man, they react to it. That is basically our setup. And it's really fun. This is... James Robinson, as I already said, is a strong writer, and he does really well with these kind of off-kilter concepts. He always has. And this is my favorite kind of Battleworld story, Secret Wars tie-in, where we're basically getting a sort of an Elseworld, sort of a what-if. And this is a fun setup. The whole everybody stuck in armor is a unique thing. Now, due to the vagaries of scheduling, we actually got issues 1 and 2 of Armor Wars in June. So I could definitely say that I'm really enjoying this. This is one of I think one of the better books coming out of Secret Wars. And I think most of the books in Secret Wars so far have been pretty good, but this is a very strong one. The art, it took me a little getting used to it at first, but as it went along, and it started to grow on me, and it works with the whole futuristic neo-noir, whole, cyberpunk future setting, and the artist definitely does a good job with faces, and he does a good job with armor, and because the thing is, everybody's wearing armor, but they don't necessarily wear faceplates all the time, so we get to see their faces, and he does good job balancing that all up and giving different characters unique armor designs which suit their personalities and behavior and jobs, and it's a really well done mini, and I'm excited to see the rest of this. It's not going to change the world. It's not going to, it's not the greatest comic ever made, but it is a strong, if you like if you like a mystery, if you like people in armor going around, if you like a lot of like the futuristic anime, if you like stuff like Ghost in the Shell, stuff like that, I think you'll get a kick out of that. That's what this kind of reminds me a lot of. It has a very similar feel, because this is as much a story of politics and manipulation of characters as it is people in armor beating the crap out of each other. There's both going on, because Tony technically could just have Arno killed whenever he wants, but he wants to be a good man. He wants to be a better man than that, and so he's struggling with trying to stay a good man in the face of people who don't care, in the face of people who only want power. So it's the classic hero dilemma. And I really appreciate that, and the supporting characters are well done too. Some of these are just new characters, and we get introduced to them in the first 2 issues, and by the end of the second issue, you already start to really care for them because they're very well sketched, they're well developed in a scant amount of time, and that's something that Robinson has always been very good at, is fleshing out characters in a few pages. So, overall, I really enjoyed Armor Wars a great deal. Even the art may not immediately be your cup of tea, but I ask you, give it a little bit of time. And even if you're not thrilled with the art, I think you'll really like the writing. And this is definitely one to give a shot, especially if you're a fan of Iron Man. Alright, next up we have one of the more anticipated tie-ins from Secret Wars, Captain Marvel and the Carol Corps, written by Kelly Sue DeConnick and Kelly Thompson, art by David Lopez. This is, like a number of titles, this is set in a specific domain, namely Holofields, and we follow a different version of Captain Marvel than we get in the main books. In this one, she really is in the military directly. That's where the name comes from. She still has the same powers, and she's part of a squadron, leader of a squadron of women who fly basically fancy futuristic fighter jets. The other women themselves were all characters who previously showed up during, well, they're new versions of a World War II all-female fighting squadron that showed up in the mainline Captain Marvel book a while back during some time travel shenanigans, basically. So these are those characters, but repurposed for a more modern setting, not that we really get much outside the military base. And yeah, first of all, Captain Marvel, great book, one of the more fun, enjoyable titles Marvel's putting out, and thankfully, unlike Angela Witchhunter, the translation this time, because this is the same, or at least one of the same writing team who's been doing the mainline Captain Marvel book, the translation here works really well. A number of these Secret Wars titles are dealing with the whole fact that these characters, they know, or on a subconscious level, some of them know something isn't right. That this whole battle world setup is off. Because the whole idea is that there was never anything before Battleworld. That's the official party line. That there were no stars in the heavens. That there were no other planets. That all there's ever been is Battleworld and Doom. Except that you have characters who wear stars on their uniforms, who are originally from other planets, who don't belong necessarily on Earth. And this is one of the books that where we see these characters, they get a sense of disquiet, of unease. And you get some really good mileage out of it in Captain Marvel because they know something's wrong. But you remember, to speak out against Doom, to not follow, the orthodoxy is to be a heretic. And bad things happen if you're a heretic. See Age of Ultron versus Marvel Zombies for an example of that. So, basically in this book, we are following Marvel and her squad mates on what starts out as an average day, and then things start to go wrong and go weird. And that's what I will leave it at. This is a really fun book. If you've been reading the mainline Captain Marvel book, then you're probably already definitely going to pick this up. But if you haven't, this is a decent place to start. Unlike Angela Witchhunter, you could come into this completely blind. You don't need to know anything about the character. The exposition is handled well, and even in a single issue, the writers do a good job of introducing Carol and her squad mates and making them all likable, appealing characters who you want to see more of. I, for one, kind of hope that as coming out of Secret Wars, we get to keep this, squadron of women, because they're really great supporting characters. That time travel storyline was one of the best stories, in the last couple of years to come out of Captain Marvel, a book which has had a lot of great stories in recent years, and I would love to see modern-day incarnations of them stick around. But regardless, this is a fun book. This is definitely one of the stronger Secret Wars tie-ins. You don't necessarily, how much it's going to actually connect to the main story remains to be seen, but as its own little, what if, it's very effective. So I definitely strongly recommend it. You have great writing, gorgeous art, an intriguing setup, and all the makings of a fun miniseries. Alright, next up on the hit parade is one that's going to be interesting for me to review. That is is for Extinction, written by Chris Burnham, art by Ramon Villalobos. Okay. The pitch for this one is, what if Grant Morrison's run on X-Men had never ended? What if that style and approach to X-Men comics had continued on forever. That's basically what we have a lot of characters from that run. We also have an art style that is very clearly trying to replicate the art from that run. And yeah, I'm on record as saying I despise Grant Morrison's take on X-Men. And I'm not a real big fan of the art either, but really it's the writing especially. I just felt like I don't have time to go into everything that I despise about that run, but I really felt like Morrison didn't get the characters. I felt like he did a lot of damage to a lot of characters that I like. I used to be a big Emma Frost fan, but ever since Morrison came along, I found her to be very one-note, uninteresting. I thought she was a much better character in her Gen X days, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, it's kind of hard for me to... I'm going to do my best to be objective. I didn't personally love this book, but you know what? Considering it's a remit, it does its job pretty well. The art, mirrors the style of the original comics well. And Burnham, who's a good writer, he definitely is doing a decent job of capturing that Morrison tone. We pick up the catch here is it's supposedly a number of years later in that, supposed run. And we have now, Xavier is dead, Magneto is running the school, basically, and he's running it in a nasty sort of, nearly psychotic kind of way. And then, meanwhile, sitting on the sidelines, gotten out of the game, Wolverine and Beast, and finally you have Cyclops and Emma Frost still trying to be their old selves, but things aren't quite going right for them. Their powers seem to be weakening, they seem to be jokes, and we pick up from there. It's, for what it's trying to do, it's fine. It definitely, like I said, it does a good job of nailing the spirit and the tone and the look of those books. If that's what you want, you will be very happy. If, like me, you really despised this era of X-Men, then you will be less impressed. Will I keep reading it? Yes, because I'm reading all the Secret Wars titles, but if I wasn't reading them all for review, this is one of the ones I'd probably drop, yeah. Because it's not for me. To be fair, the book doesn't look like it's trying to necessarily say that Magneto's in the right, and that his way of doing things are right. I mean, it is what it is. If you want more Grant Morrison X-Men, if you don't mind like a fanfic version of that, a very good fanfic version of that, but a fanfic version of that all the same, good news. Here's the book for you. Alright, so what do you get when you take one of my all-time favorite comic book writers and you take one of my all-time least favorite comic book artists? Well, you get Future Imperfect from writer Peter David and artist Greg Land. And yeah, if you know anything about comics, the name Greg Land should immediately be setting your teeth on edge, and with good reason. And if you don't, I recommend you go check out Linkara's review of Supreme Power 1 and 2 for a good summary of exactly why you should dread Greg Land. However, to be fair, this is probably some of the best work from Greg Land we've gotten in years. Which is not to say this is great art, or good art, or even, okay art. This is sort of functional art. This is barely acceptable art. But sort of functional, barely acceptable from Greg Land, that's a goddamn triumph. I mean, I didn't throw away the book in disgust. I didn't want to poke out my own eyes with a hot poker, and I could actually understand what was going on, and not every single image looked like a porn face. He actually managed to keep porn face to more or less of a minimum. So again, backhanded compliments, but from Greg Land, a fucking triumph. Doesn't mean I would still have rather had almost any other artist on this, but okay. However, regardless of the art, what makes this work is, of course, Peter David, who, as I said, is one of the best writers to ever work in comics. And this is him returning to a character he helped create, the Maestro. If you don't know, the Maestro is basically a future version of the Hulk who, years and years down the line, basically went bad and became ruler of what remained of humanity in this kind of post-apocalyptic dystopia. And he's basically, he's an old man, he's got a beard, so it's a Hulk with, bald and long old man hair and a beard, and it's all white and stuff. But also somebody who's gotten only stronger, because over the years he's absorbed more and more radiation, so he's become even stronger than he ever was when he was, just the regular Incredible Hulk. And he's also a Hulk who's got all the intelligence of Bruce Banner, but none of the morals. So the Maestro is one of the most famous creations of Peter David's epic 10-year Hulk run, and this is him returning to it and also returning to a number of characters he created back when he created the Maestro. And it's a really good return, and it's a really interesting take, because the Maestro in a world where Doom rules, well, that's an interesting setup, because the Maestro would not be content to serve, and I'll just leave it at that. Overall, this is a really well-written issue. There's the usual bit of humor, but there's also good action. There's a clever twist halfway through the issue. I kind of saw it coming, but that doesn't make it any less clever, just because I've read so much shit, people. And this was good, and with the art being sort of tolerable, this I will actually be able to keep reading Future Imperfect, which I'm glad. So this is a very good book in terms of writing from Peter David, if you can tolerate the art, and I think you'll find the art more tolerable than usual from Greg Land. So, it's not a complete anchor around the neck of this book. Faint praise, perhaps, but again, from Greg Land, that's a good day. Alright, our next title is, it's giant-sized Little Marvel AVX, A vs. X, written and drawn by Scotty Young. And if you don't know what this is basically Scotty Young returning. For years now, Marvel's been doing these, have had Scotty Young, one of my favorite artists in comics, doing these little baby versions of Marvel characters on the covers. And back during A vs. X, a crossover event which pitted the X-Men against the Avengers, he did a one-shot, a humorous little one-shot, which Marvel doing kid versions of their characters is not a new concept. The X-Babies are characters who have been running around on the outskirts of Marvel continuity for years. But Scotty Young has probably done the best take on it out of anybody. The setup is basically, this is the domain of Marvel, and on Avengers Street and X-Men Way, the Avengers and X-Men kid versions of them battle it out every day for supremacy on the playground and other things, and it's just, this is completely not essential in terms of the larger event storyline, but completely essential in terms of having fun and still possessing a soul. No, really, this is a book, if you just want to smile the whole time, if you want to smile so much it fucking hurts, then you need to read giant-sized Little Marvel A vs. X. Scotty Young's art is just wonderful, glorious. It's always great to see him do little versions of popular characters, and this is no exception. And it's so much fun. This is basically, a bunch of little stories put into a single issue. But the writing is funny, the artist is gorgeous to look at, the whole thing, there's some really brilliant, wonderful jokes, like, for instance, the way that characters like Cable and Bishop work, because they have guns, and how they work with their little kid versions is kind of brilliant, and just lots of great jokes. And the last page promises us even more insanity yet to come. So, yeah, you should be reading this book. If you like fun, if you are not dead inside, if you enjoy wonderful things that make the world a better place, that give you a reason to live, that justify the existence of humanity. I'm not overselling this, am I? Nah. No, seriously though. Go read giant-sized Little Marvel A vs. X. Okay, next we move to the Korvac Saga #1, written by Dan Abnett, art by Otto Schmidt. This one's interesting. Now, Dan Abnett is a name who should be familiar to any true Marvel fan. He, along with Andy Lanning, was the team that basically gave us the Guardians of the Galaxy that have become popular since in the movie. He was the one who really took the Guardians, who, before they came along, they were basically Marvel's answer to the Legion of Superheroes. They were a group of heroes set way in the future, like in the year 3000. It was Abnett and Lanning who came up with the idea of taking a bunch of randoms, cosmic characters, and putting them together in a book in modern-day Marvel continuity, and from there going off running. And it's still, if you've never read their Guardians of the Galaxy run, you don't know what you're missing. they set the stage for a lot of what has become so popular today. And so this is one of the architects of that, taking on, he's been also doing now, for a while now, a Guardians 3000 book, which basically is going back to those future Guardians. And this book takes those characters, but sets them on Battleworld. And it's an interesting twist, because these are always characters who have been set in the stars. They're the opposite of your standard superhero team. And they're now existing on a world where there are no stars. And they're existing on a world where things just aren't right. And as I said, a number of books have been dealing with the fact that whatever Doom has done, what Doom did to save the remnants of the Marvel Universe, the Marvel Multiverse, it wasn't exact science. And there are holes, and there are patches, and there are things that don't quite fit together right, as you would imagine, from this patchwork, hodgepodge excuse for a world. So, in the Guardians domain, things are starting to get really bad as a result of that. People are remembering, sort of. They're having dreams, and then they're turning into monsters. And nobody knows what's going on. Because most people don't remember there was anything before. And those who do remember have the nightmares that then eventually mutate. And we see it as horribly as one character who was basically Emil Blonsky, a version of Emil Blonsky, aka the Incredible Hulk foe, the Abomination. He remembers his old life, and then he turns into a truly hideous version of the Abomination. And meanwhile, while this is going on, all this is going on in the background of the ruler of the domain of the Guardians is a character called Michael Korvac. He was somebody from one of the more famous 70s Avengers stories, which actually brought the Guardians into contact with the Avengers. And basically, he's one of these all-powerful, cosmic being types, a person who basically became like a Q, sort of, along that lines. A person who gained unbelievable, nigh unbeatable cosmic powers. You get the basic idea. He was a villain, but he was a tragic villain. He was a guy who meant well, who wanted to do the right thing, but got lost in his own power, and eventually, it's a great story, and you should go read it, but basically, he sort of wins. It's like neither the Avengers nor the Guardians can actually take him out, and the way things play out, it ends tragically. He is a very tragic character, but in this is Korvac, who isn't quite as tragic of a figure. This is Korvac, the best part of him. And he rules his domain well. He rules it with compassion and with caring, and with his wife by his side. But they're being threatened by another realm, which they have relationships with, run by Wonder Man, Simon Williams. And his team is the Avengers. And Simon, this is the Hollywood obsessed. This is the fame and fortune. This is the smiling, but stabs you in the back version of Wonder Man. And he basically wants to take over Korvac's domain. And so we have a state visit where they're trying to sign a peace treaty with one another, and he's being accompanied by, it's basically the 70s incarnation of the Avengers. You got Captain Marvel, you've got Jocasta, you got Black Panther, Hercules, Moondragon, Yellow Jacket, Vision, Black Widow. So they're visiting, and there's that it's kind of like the inner team, like a DC Marvel rivalry. They're kind of friendly, but kind of rivals. But in the background, there's a tension, and then, as I said, there's all these people turning into monsters. And people starting to remember the way things were. This is a really good book. I knew it was going to be well written, because again, look at the creative, look at the writer. I saw some preview pages, and I wasn't sure if the art was really going to click with me, but by the end of the issue, I don't know, I think either it grew on me, or the artist got more comfortable, but by the end of the issue, I actually thought the art was working pretty damn well. And this was a good book. This is a book that really uses the Battle World setting well, although it doesn't quite fit it. I mean, the biggest problem with Battle World is there's inconsistencies. Some realms seem to know that there are other realms, but don't allow any communication between them. Some realms don't even understand that there are other domains. Some realms are like these where they talk. I mean, there's not really a clear set of rules. Why can some domains do this? Why can't? I mean, Bendis is especially bad at it. His books have been especially kind of bad at that, but that's another story. I mean, but you know what? Fine. That's an issue, but it doesn't kill this specific book. That's an issue of a larger issue of editorial. And I don't care, because this is a really good read. This takes a bunch of great characters, or versions of characters who I have a real fondness for, because I didn't grow up in the 70s. I was born in 1979, but I grew up what got me into comics were a bunch of old comics from the 70s and the early 80s that we found. We moved into a new house when I was 6 years old. Like, I'm talking all sorts of classic stuff from the 70s and also the 80s, like the Claremont Byrne run, and just all sorts of stuff, the Marv Wolfman Teen Titans, all these great, some of the greatest comics ever made, basically, and I love to see revisiting this period and these versions of the characters, and it's an interesting setup for the book, and I'm very curious to see where we go with this. This ought to end up being a fun 4-issue series. If you like the Guardians of the Galaxy, if you like Marvel's cosmic side, or if you have a fondness for the 70s version of Marvel, or if you just want to try an interesting book with a bit of mixture of action and political intrigue, all wrapped up in a superhero bow, check out Korvac Saga #1. This is a strong release, definitely one of the better Secret Wars tie-ins for June. So, earlier I mentioned how surprised I was about Age of Ultron versus Marvel Zombies, mainly because how much I disliked Age of Ultron and really disliked Marvel Zombies in general, despite some of the Marvel Zombie books actually being pretty good in their own right. I'm just not a fan of seeing the heroes turned into hideous monsters that kill everybody. These are characters I've admired and loved for years, and I'm not fond of that. I'm not fond of terrible, awful things happening to characters I like. It's the same reason I can't get into Afterlife with Archie or to Archie versus Predator. It's not my thing. I know somebody will say I'm overly sensitive, but fine. If I am, I am. And yet, I really liked Age of Ultron versus Marvel Zombies, and I also really enjoyed Marvel Zombies #1, written by Simon Spurrier and art by Kev Walker. Now, no, this is, yes, a second Marvel Zombies Secret Wars tie-in. Yes, really. Apparently, Marvel Zombies are so amazing and awesome, we had to have 2 separate tie-ins for them. And yet they're both pretty damn good. Kev Walker is a natural artist to take on the kind of, bloody, messy crap that would be a Marvel Zombies book. And Simon Spurrier is a good writer to do something. Basically what this really is this is an Elsa Bloodstone mini. And if you don't know who she is, she's a character from Next Wave, for Warren Ellis's Next Wave. She's the daughter of Bloodstone, who's a mystic, low-rank mystic Marvel hero. She basically, in the mainline continuity, she hunts monsters, and it's a family tradition. Her father did too. But in Secret Wars, she serves on the Wall as part of the Shield. And which, I've talked about before, the Wall is the big thing that keeps all the zombies and Ultrons and all the bad things on Battleworld away from the rest of Battleworld. So, she's part of the member of the Shield that helps protect things, and in this issue, while taking on some Marvel Zombies, she accidentally gets teleported into the middle of the Deadlands, where she encounters a mysterious bald-headed child with no memory of his past or who he is, and the two of them have to set out together to try and get out of the Deadlands before they get chomped on by the endless stream of monsters. And at the same time, Elsa's also having flashbacks to her her uptight, merciless father and the way he raised her, and strange things are also happening with devices that she owns, and there are hints that larger things are going on in the Deadlands. So overall, yeah, this is a good book. If you want, a bloody, messy action title, in a bit of the vein of Next Wave, not nearly as insane as that. I mean, nowhere near as that, but more in the sense of, a grindhouse kind of heads exploding everywhere, body parts flying, blood and guts, and gore. This is your book. This is a well-done action title, and with some really gorgeous art. The next to last page of the issue has Elsa and the boy overlooking. It's just a one-page, wordless... It's a wordless, single-page image of them standing up on a cliff overlooking the Deadlands, stretching out before them with literally the hordes of zombies, stretching out in the distance, including what would appear to be like giant zombies, and it's a gorgeous, gorgeous page. It's the kind of page you could easily see somebody, making into a poster and putting up on their wall, and there's a lot of Walker is doing some amazing art in this mini. His art style has really improved. I mean, he was always a good artist, but there was a sketchiness to his style that didn't always work in storytelling terms, but he's managed to really tighten up things without losing his style, without, completely becoming house-style Marvel, and now he's just become very good. Like I said, he's able to do like a one-page shot that tells the whole story in and of itself. I'm showing you the page right now, and this page tells a whole story in and of itself, and so I'm amazed. This is a really good book. This is probably even better than Age of Ultron versus Marvel Zombies, and I actually really enjoyed it. I like this take on Elsa Bloodstone. I like the art. I'm curious to see where things are going. There's some mysteries in this book, and I'm kind of intrigued by that. So yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to more Secret Wars Marvel Zombies. Who would have thunk it? Okay, next up, we have Mrs. Deadpool and the Howling Commandos. Written by Gary Duggan, art by Salva Espin, and I hate to say it, this is one of the misfires. And I really hate to say that because you think that Gary Duggan, if you don't know, has been the regular writer on Deadpool for quite a while now, and he's been doing a very good job with the character, but the thing you have to understand is this isn't really a Deadpool title. He appears briefly in the opening of the book, and basically this replays the climax of where, a while back, Deadpool got hired by Dracula to escort his bride to him, and as these things happen, his bride turned out to be this monstrous woman who could shift between, this beautiful, human-looking form and a more powerful monstrous form, and basically Deadpool fell in love with her, and they got married instead, and he got into a big fight with Dracula at the end of the storyline and took down Dracula. Well, this posits where Deadpool lost, and basically Deadpool gets killed, and what happened next, and the book is trying to be as funny, the Deadpool book from Duggan has been a very good mix of humor and action, with occasional bits of characterization, but overall, yeah, very much focused on humor, and unfortunately, it turns out when you take Deadpool out of the equation, because these are a lot of the same characters who have been supporting players in the Deadpool book for a while, but when you take Deadpool out of the equation, it doesn't work. I don't know. I've never been overly fond of Mrs. Deadpool, as it were. She's not a terrible character, but she's not particularly interesting either. I mean, it's just, they tried really hard to make her interesting. She doesn't really work. And this particular version of the Howling Commandos, which is no real relation to the ones we're going to get who will be members of S.H.I.E.L.D., it's like, a Werewolf by Night, Living Mummy, Frankenstein, Man-Thing, and the Centaur, and they're not particularly fun either. The book's, it's not as funny as it thinks it is. The art's okay, but it's only okay. The setup is she's going into hell, looking for stuff, and it doesn't really feel like it fits that well into Secret Wars. It doesn't feel like that particularly good of a standalone story either, and you really, the few pages that Deadpool shows up, you really get how much you miss Deadpool in this, and trying to play Dracula for laughs doesn't really work either. This book is a misfire, just pure and simple. Unless you are a really super hardcore Deadpool fan, don't waste your time with it. It doesn't particularly work, plain and simple. It's not terrible, but it's mediocre enough that really, with so many books to read, don't bother. Alright, time to take a look at Miss Marvel number 16, from writer G. Willow Wilson, art by Adrian Alfona, and you're goddamn right you should be reading this book. You should have already been reading this book. This is one of the best titles Marvel's been putting out in years. This is part one of the last days of Miss Marvel. This is the pre-Civil War tie-in, basically. This is one of the books where we get to see what happened in the last hours leading up to the destruction of everything. And yes, in terms of the larger storyline, so far, none of these books have technically been essential reading, but Miss Marvel is essential reading all on its own. And this is a really great concept because she's a character really well suited for a Last Day storyline, because she's someone who's very tied to her family and to her friends and to her community. It's been a big part of this book all along, and as the world is coming to the end in the final hours, she's trying to gather together her friends and gather together everybody. There's a moment where she's taking everybody in her town, into this local school gym, and she thinks to herself, this is it. My whole world in one room. People I care about, people I want to protect. They expect me to fix things, but how do I fix something this big? And it's this really powerful moment. The best of these Last Day titles have really explored, what do characters do when the end is inevitable? Do you keep trying regardless? Do you deal with do you try and deal with pre-existing leftover debts, or do you just do whatever you can, because even just trying in the face of the inevitable is worth something? And you know, Miss Marvel, again, one of Marvel's best books, and this is every bit as good as you would expect from an issue. And then we get the last page, and the last page is the moment Marvel fans, Miss Marvel fans, have been waiting for. That's all I'll say. And next issue is going to be required reading. It's the big moment, the moment that since issue 1 we've all been anticipating, and it looks like it's all about to go down. Yeah, this is a great book. This is, you know, you shouldn't start with this issue, though. I will say, you should go back and start with issue 1. There's trades, it's been on sale, it was on sale lately. There's lots of ways to get Miss Marvel. Go buy it, start with issue 1, read the whole series, and then you can thank me later. But however you get to it, eventually, yes, absolutely, must read Miss Marvel number 16. Alright, time to rev up the engines and get your motors running, because we're taking a look at Ghost Racers number 1. Story by Felipe Smith, art by Juan Gideon. This is the same writer who has been writing the all-new, all-different Ghost Rider. Basically, he's an indie writer, established indie writer, but this is, I believe, has been his first major work for Marvel, and it's been terrific. All-new, all-different Ghost Rider has just been a hell of a lot of fun, and you know, in a kind of introducing a new Latino character as the latest Ghost Rider. And this is a book that brings together, basically, the capital of Battleworld is known as Doomstat, and it is this kind of really big metropolis, metropolitan area, you know, high culture, all that, and they're entertained by the Killicinium, which is run by Arcade. That's the same place that we encountered last month in Planet Hulk. It's where all the gladiator fights go on. But in addition to the gladiator fights, the big entertainment for the Killicinium are the ghost races. And this is where we take a bunch of Ghost Riders and we send them out onto a dangerous battlefield to compete for glory and all that, and where anything goes, where there are traps and monsters abound, and where of course the riders can attack each other. And so, you know, we have, you know, in addition to established characters like Alexandra Blaze, Johnny Blaze, Danny Ketch, we also have Robbie Reyes, which was the star of All New Ghost Rider. And basically, yeah, this book is gonzo, it's nuts, it's perfect. Really, this is exactly what I want. I mean, you got a Ghost Rider who his steed is himself. He basically turns into a centaur, but a centaur armed with dual chain guns. Yes, dual chain guns that shoot out hell bullets. A centaur cowboy Ghost Rider with chain guns that shoot out hell bullets. What else do you need, people? No, this is a really good book. The art is wonderful. It captures the action and the insanity of everything that's going on and all the different madness, but it also handles the more human elements well, and it's well written. You know, this is continuing in a way the character of, you know, the character we saw in All New Ghost Rider, and that's great. But we also get to see some more other faces, and the whole setup of, you know, of compete. You know, the winner of the Ghost races, it lives in luxury, but the losers, well, they don't live so well. And there's a lot of tension in that, and they're basically slaves to the system. They don't race because they want to, they race because they have to, and right, this is basically the setup issue, and clearly things are going to start to go really off the rails, as it were. And no doubt our different Ghost Riders are going to have to team up if they want to get out of this basically bad place. So this is just a fun, wild, crazy book that, much like Korvac Saga, does a good job of taking advantage of the setup for Battleworld. It's a little confusing because, again, I mean, you know, there's talk that this gets broadcasted across Battleworld, and you're like, well, broadcasted to who? I mean, obviously Doomstat, which is the capital of Battleworld, but are there other places that watch this? I mean, you know, again, the culture of Battleworld doesn't entirely make sense, but to be fair, that's also kind of by design. It's all this, it's meant to be this fragmented, you know, contradictory place. And it's kind of the idea. So, I don't know, or maybe I'm just justifying. Regardless, Ghost Racers is another strong book. If you've enjoyed Ghost Rider in the past, you will absolutely like this book. If you didn't read All New Ghost Rider, and judging by sales, a lot of you didn't, this is a great way to kind of meet the character that if you like, go back. I think it's only gone for like 6 or 7 issues. It hasn't been a long-running book, and I don't know if it's coming back. It certainly wasn't announced in the first wave of All New, All Different Marvel. I hope it does, even if it is low-selling, because again, Smith has just been doing great stuff with the character and the concept. But if this is the swan song, at least it's going out big. So definitely, I strongly recommend Ghost Racers, especially if you like a kind of, if you like a good crazy time. And now it's time for something a little more sinister. Squadron Sinister, that is. Written by Mark Guggenheim, he of the DC TV cinematic universe, and art by Carlos Pacheco, one of my all-time favorite comic artists. I've said that several times already, but what can I say? Whatever you think about the Secret Wars tie-ins, you can't deny Marvel's getting some first-rate talent. And Squadron Sinister is just wonderful, nasty comics. If you like villain books, if you like books where the bad guys are the leads and where nasty stuff happens left and right, then this is the book for you. If you don't know, the Squadron Sinister are the evil versions of the Squadron Supreme, which has always been Marvel's thinly veiled, Justice League equivalents. So you could say that they're basically this is the Squadron Supreme of Earth 3. This is like the crime syndicate. So the Squadron Sinister, you have Hyperion and Power Princess and Nighthawk and Wizard. Oh, not Power Princess, Warrior Woman, Dr. Spectrum. So, yeah, and basically they're rulers of a domain on Battle World, and as the book opens, they're taking over another domain, one that just happens to be the domain of the Squadron from the Supreme Power book. So you get a fun bit of meta commentary there as they really mess up the Supreme Power characters. The old school kicking the living crap out of the new school, so that's fun. And then the rest deals with basically something bad happens, and now the Squadron is trying to react to that bad thing while also continuing on with business. And since they are all villains, you basically have, the politics, you have the who can trust each other, you just back and forth, betrayals, alliances. It's all meaty, fun, nasty stuff. This is the darker side of comics to a degree, although, darker relatively. I mean, there is some violence, certainly. This is not necessarily a book for kids, but it's also not, this is not, it ain't an Avatar book. How about I put it to you that way? No, this is a PG-13, maybe an R, but it's a good one, and the art is just gorgeous, gorgeous stuff from Pacheco. And Guggenheim really gets the characters. He gets what makes an evil Justice League such a fun concept. He gets that, it's the politicking. It's the Superman versus Batman. It's the who can you trust. It's the, the powers and the sex and all the control and just... And all the Squadron characters get their moment in this. So you really get to see why they're all such dangerous characters. And they are. They're some of the most dangerous people in Battle World. That much is made very clear by the end of this issue, and I'm looking forward to more. I'm looking forward to more nasty shenanigans in the months to come. Basically, if you want to walk on the darker side of the Marvel universe, this is absolutely the book for you. You will not be sorry. I really do. I think you'll like this one. It's a good book. It's well written. It's well drawn. It really has fun with the premise. All around, another excellent Secret Wars book. And now it's time for the book that a lot of us had been waiting for. Thors. Written by Jason Aaron. Penciler by Chris Sprouse. If you don't know, on Battle World, the cops of Battle World are Thors. All kinds of Thors, including Groot Thor, Storm Thor, Destroyer Thor, Ultimate Thor, Beta Ray Bill Thor, all kinds of Iron Thor, Frog Thor. If there's a Thor you can imagine, they are on Battle World, and they are the police officers of it, patrolling the different realms, making sure that whatever goes on in the realm, it sticks to itself, and that people obey the rules of doom. And Jason Aaron, who is the regular writer on Thor, and has given us so many, it's just having one of those great all-time runs that's going to be spoken of in the same breath as Frank Miller's Daredevil, or Mark Waid's Daredevil, or... Yeah, okay, I like a lot of Daredevil. But seriously, though, this is there's a definite argument to be made that Jason Aaron is having the best run on Thor ever, certainly in the top 3. So I was very excited for this, and overall, I enjoyed it. Now, I know some people have reacted negatively to the book for a couple reasons. First of all, Aaron, when he was describing the book leading up to its launch, he said this was going to be a cop story. This was Thor as a cop. Only a whole cop full of Thors, a whole cop force full of Thors. And he said he was going to embrace all the cliches gleefully. And that in this first issue, that is exactly what he does. We have the cop who's not liked by the others because he's too good at his job. We have the angry forensics officer, although in this case, the grumpy forensics scientist is Frog Thor, so yes. We have the cops taking on a biker gang, although again, in this case, the biker gang is a small army of skeletal ghost riders. We have the angry chief, who in this case is basically Odin. I mean, yes, there are a lot of cop cliches present in this, but what you have to understand is, that's not a bug. It's a feature. And, okay, look, I'm hoping we're going to move beyond just pure cliche in the issues ahead, okay? I really do. Because if it's just nothing but cliches, yes, that could get old. This is, I think, like a 5-issue mini. But already, in this issue, we see some, moments you couldn't get in any other cop story. Aaron is not ignoring the fact that that this is an army of Thors going out there on patrol. And he's definitely having fun with the concept. Now, the other thing is that the mystery at the heart of this, or at least the initial mystery, are women in different domains being murdered. 5 different women, and, okay, small spoiler here, and it's not a really big deal. As it turns out, they're all Jane Foster. And if you don't know why that's a big deal, you haven't been reading current Thor, and I'll just leave it at that. And I've heard accusations of fridging and stuff like that. Look, I do not believe for a minute that's fridging, okay? Fridging is something specific where a female supporting character is killed just to, or any character really, any supporting character is killed just to progress the main character's arc, just to make them more tortured and to give them something to angst about and things like that. And that's not what's going on here. This is a book obeying, the tropes of the cop murder mystery. And to do the cop murder mystery, you have to have murder victims. And I'm assuming Aaron's going somewhere with this. I don't think it's an accident that all the victims are Jane Foster. But Jane Foster's not a supporting character in this book. This isn't Thor, it's Thors. This is a different book. It's a 5-issue mini. It's not directly connected to what's going on in the main Thor book. And when we come back, yeah, Jane's still going to be around. Okay, there's the big spoiler. Fine, it's been months. Jane is the current female Thor, Jane Foster. And she is still going to be after the event. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Jane Foster version of Thor shows up in this and gets a little of her own back. But this is not, in my opinion, fridging. Now, you could take complaint at the whole cliche of the women being killed, serial killer thing. And, okay, there, I agree with you. It's a trope I'm not particularly fond of, though. Again, it's part and parcel with the genre, and it is kind of necessary for this story, because the whole point is that the Thor we're following, the main Thor we're following, is basically a variation off of Ultimate Thor. There's even a cute little joke, play off of that. He's literally called Ultimate Thor by his fellows, kind of sarcastically, because he's the guy who could solve any mystery. He's the Sherlock Holmes, as it were, of the Thors. And he basically has been, what's been called an all thing. He's got like 5 days, basically, or something along that line, to solve the case, or else he's going to be in a ton of trouble. And so, it's the whole, the ticking clock, solving the mystery, all that. Look, if you're going to complain about cop cliches being bad in and of themselves, that's a larger argument, holding that against this book in and of itself. Also, we're only 1 issue in, okay? Now, and again, there's another character who dies in this, and some people are saying that's fridging. Tropes are not automatically bad, people. Just because something could arguably be a trope, and I'm not even sure I would call that a fridging. Again, it's part and parcel of the genre. But, tropes are not automatically bad. Just because you spot something that looks like a trope doesn't mean it represents bad writing. Now, if you don't enjoy this issue, I'm not going to tell somebody they have to enjoy it, okay? I don't agree with the opinion that what's going on in this is fridging, okay? That's all. And I really enjoyed this. I'm looking forward to where we go over the rest of the issues. This promises to be important. Potentially, we were told this is going to be important to the main series, and I can already see a number of ways it could be. It's well written. It's well drawn. Aaron, like I said, he's just one of the best Thor writers ever. He gets these characters, and he's clearly just having a ton of fun writing all these different versions of the character. So all I would say is just let's wait and see. We've got 4 more issues, and I suspect by the end, a lot of concerns about this will be addressed. If not, fine, and nobody's perfect, everybody makes a misstep, but so far at least, I'm enjoying Thor's, and I heartily recommend you try it out. It's a really fun book. It's it's one of those books that, like I've said it before, you tend to either get you get a couple kinds of Secret Wars titles. You get the ones that are just completely crazy and out there. You get the ones that really take advantage of the setup, but then you get the ones that are basically really just what ifs or Elseworlds, thinly, where somebody's just gone in and replaced a few phrases and thrown in a few Doom references. Thor's is the one that really is one of the ones that takes advantage of the whole setup. And does so very well. And if you've been enjoying the Thor book, or if you like Jason Aaron's stuff in general, or if you're looking for a truly unusual cop tale, one that goes a bit off the, with cops like you've never seen, congratulations, Thor's your book. Alright, people, buckle up, hang on, because things are about to get weird. It's Weird World #1. From Jason Aaron, hey, that name sounds familiar, and art by Mike Del Mundo. And, wow. Well, nobody can accuse Weird World of being anything less than truth in advertising. For those who don't know, Weird World was this short run, couple one-shot or stories in the backup of the black and white Marvel magazines that ran back in the 70s and were originally created by Doug Minnick and Mike Plug, and basically were these kind of offbeat, strange fantasy tales featuring a couple of elf-like characters getting into fantasy adventures. And it didn't last long. It didn't run very long because of these whole issues. There were a lot of back and forth disagreements, creative disagreements, things like that. But the long and short of it is, it's not particularly well known, but it has a cult following among fans, among the hardcore comic book set. And this miniseries is a deliberate tribute to that, and also bringing in a bunch of other elements, sword and sorcery elements from out the Marvel universe. The lead of the book is Archon. He hasn't been around much of late, but he was a character who appeared a bunch in the 80s, 70s. He's basically a Conan-like type who ended up, over a number of different things, ended up fighting the Avengers, and the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, and a couple, he's like a barbarian leader, and he's also had relationships at times with Thundara, a female barbarian from a post-apocalyptic alternate future where men have all gone savage and animalistic, and women are the only source of sanity. It was a whole thing. So, anyways, Archon, I have fond memories of Archon. Like I said, he appeared in a bunch of those issues I talked about that I had, and this is definitely not for those who are looking for anything straightforward. I mean, the art is unlike anything else in Secret Wars, and really not much else like anything Marvel's publishing in general. And the story is basically following Archon. He's been lost from his land, and he's looking for it, and he's lost in the domain known as Weird World, which is ruled by none other than Morgan Le Fay, the Marvel version, who has been a long time reoccurring character in the Marvel Universe, the Marvel version of her. DC also has a version of Morgan Le Fay. A lot of these companies have versions of Morgan Le Fay because she's the whole King Arthur thing, but she's hardly the only threat. We have dragons, and we have lizard men, and we have underwater ape men. Yes, underwater ape men. As the book itself says, welcome to Weird World. The best thing I can say is what I already said. This is a book that surely lives up to its title. Jason Aaron often has a strange side to his stuff. He loves the kind of grindhouse aesthetic, and he loves just crazy, incredibly strange, and he just goes all out in Weird World. He holds nothing back, and the art matches what he's doing perfectly. Again, this does not look like your standard Marvel book at all, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. This will not be for everybody, I will say right now. If you're looking for anything superhero related, keep on going, friend. Keep on going. There ain't no superheroes in this book. This is sword and sorcery meets insane science fiction, and then goes even crazier. This is every genre imaginable being mashed up. This is lizardmen riding on robo rhinos and shooting at a dragon riding a barbarian who also happens to use lightning bolts as a weapon, and just wow, even describing it on floating islands. And I happen to know what's coming in the book. There's a bunch of other old, long-abandoned Marvel concepts that are going to come back in this. This is basically Jason Aaron having fun. And if something completely bonkers sounds like your idea of fun, you'll enjoy it too. Ape men. Underwater ape men in scuba suits that look like they came right out of, I don't know, BioShock. But the important thing is, ape men. You damn dirty... No, I'm better than that. I'm better than that. No, I'm not. You damn dirty apes! And don't be a damn dirty ape. Check out Weird World. As I said, you will have no trouble finding that this book lives up to its title. Okay, we're going to wrap things up here with two X-Men related Secret Wars books, both of which are sort of sequels to classic X-Men events. One arguably more classic than the other, but anyways. First up, we have Extinction Agenda, written by Mark Guggenheim, another one of those guys getting around, art by Carmine Di Giandomenico. I hope I didn't butcher that too badly. Basically, as the title might imply, if you don't know, Extinction Agenda was probably the last big event before Marvel did the big X-Men relaunch in the 90s with Jim Lee and Claremont and all that, the one that didn't end up lasting very long, the one where they got split into the blue and gold team, the one that inspired the cartoon. This was the last big event, and it was the one that introduced Genosha, and it ended with basically Ron Sinclair, a.k.a. Wolfsbane, and Havoc, he who was Cyclops' brother. They stayed behind in Genosha afterwards, who had been kidnapping mutants and brainwashing them, and they stayed behind to try and make things better. But that status quo didn't last very long because, again, the whole X-Line relaunched, and everything changed, and, Peter David came in and did his brilliant run on X-Factor. But this Extinction Agenda basically posits, what if that hadn't happened? What if things hadn't reset? What if Rain, I've never been sure how to say her name, Rain. What if Rain and Havoc, what if Wolfsbane and Havoc and a few other familiar faces had stayed behind, and 10 years later, things are going bad in Genosha? Basically, a plague which is killing mutants is spreading throughout the land, and because of that, back in the mainland of this domain, which is ruled by Rachel Gray, a.k.a. Phoenix, she's quarantined Genosha, and there are now food riots, and people are terrified of the disease. And basically, Genosha's going to hell, and the people there feel like they've been abandoned by the X-Men, by Rachel. And the whole book is basically, this issue builds up to, what is Havoc going to do about it? What is Havoc going to do? Well, he's going to invade the mainland, despite the quarantine, to try and steal a healer in the hope that maybe, just maybe, they can save Genosha. So, this is a good book, but if you're not an X-Men fan, you're going to likely be completely lost. Like, if you don't know who Ron/Wolfsbane is, if that name does not immediately, if you don't know who that is, this may not be the book for you. I mean, to be fair, Guggenheim does his best to try and set you up. He does a flashback of the way this version of the Extinction Agenda, the original event, ended. He does try and give us some exposition to set up characters, but still, you really do need to already be familiar with the X-books, and particularly this era, the era that this book's drawing from, to most appreciate this title. That's just the way it is. And then he also goes off on some interesting tangents, which which relate to a number of current storylines in the X-books. So there's some interesting references all around to different ages and different periods of the X-books. This is a good book. It's well written. It's well drawn. It's not it's not the best Secret Wars tie-in. It's not going to set the world on fire. This is one of those what-if, Elseworld kind of titles, and it's very clearly, it seems pretty unlikely this is going to have any real connection to the larger Secret Wars event. So it's most likely utterly missable from that point of view. This one's for the fans. This one is for the fans, particularly the fans of a particular era, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of these Secret Wars tie-ins, and if they want to dedicate one or two, if they want to dedicate a number of them to fans of specific books or titles, that's fine, but it also means this book is going to have a limited appeal to you. So, again, buyer beware. If you are not already a pretty hardcore X-Men fan, if you are not already familiar with the original Extinction Agenda, and if you haven't been reading the books lately even, honestly, you may want to have second thoughts about this one. At the very least, you might want to wait for trade. I don't know. So, buyer beware, basically. Not a bad book, but if this was a game review, if this was Blister Reviews, I'd mark this one for fans only. Alright, and finally, we come to the end of this much belated look at the Secret Wars tie-ins for June with Years of Future Past. And as that title should make clear, this is a sort of sequel to one of the, if not the all-time classic X-Men story, Days of Future Past. I say sort of sequel because the hook is this. If you don't know, in the original Days of Future Past, if all you know is the movie, in the original comic version of Days of Future Past, an older Kitty Pryde transplants her mind into her younger body in order to prevent the assassination of Senator Kelly and stop an apocalyptic, basically the Sentinels rising as a force, taking over the world and bringing about a near apocalypse and nearly wiping out mutants and much of humanity in the process as well. This book posits a world where that never happened, where basically the X-Men never went back in time. They never, Kitty Pryde never actually attempted that, and how would the world have progressed from there? Also, while set, obviously, within the confines of Secret Wars. And the main characters, we have all the main characters for the original, or a number of them for the original Days of Future Past, including Wolverine, Storm, Colossus, wheelchair-bound Magneto. We also have some interesting additions. We have Kitty and Colossus's daughter, and we also have what appears to be Wolverine's son. And also in the back, and all along, this is the original Days of Future Past certainly painted a world where humanity had been hit just as badly or seemingly. This book dials back a bit on that, where it's mostly just mutants. And again, this is one of the things where the iffiness of how big is a domain in Secret Wars, you just kind of have to look past that, because we get Senator Kelly up in Air Force One, where apparently he's now president, and that's where he lives all the time, that's where he operates all the time for safety. And there are clearly regular humans still out in the city, and there is still some human society out there still active and operating as normal. So I feel like that, to be fair, it's been a few years since I've reread Days of Future Past, so maybe I'm misremembering, but I always remembered it as the Sentinels wiped out almost as humanity as well, that it was basically a Terminator sequence. That is not quite the case here. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because if that was the case, this allows for more of a story. The big hook is that basically there's talk about a reform the Mutant Control Act and put the Sentinels pull back on the Sentinels and pull back on killing all the mutants. And meanwhile, Kitty and Colossus and Magneto and Rachel Grey and the young Pride girl are all making their move, making their break, while Wolverine is in the background doing something as well. And this is a good book. Margaret Bennett she's a great writer, and she clearly has a fondness for this era, for these characters, and she does some good stuff with it. I love our new Christina Pryde, and I like, the uncle, he has a similar relationship with her that he had with the original Kitty Pryde, and his apparent son, it's good to see them, and basically, this is a fun book. Or at least as fun as a post-apocalyptic, one of these post-apocalyptic dystopia X-Men features can be. And, it's been pointed out that a lot of the X-Men books are basically a lot of the X-Men Secret Wars books are set in dystopias. And, yeah, that's kind of become an overriding theme, unfortunately, for the characters. Days of Future Past was the one that really set that into motion. And I gotta admit, I kind of hope that going forward, post-Secret Wars, we move away a bit from that, because it's getting old. It's getting old, people. Let's see something a little different. But regardless, this is a good book. It's a good what-if story. It's a good continuation of a classic story, and I'm very curious to see where it goes. There's definitely some interesting plot points. Yeah. This one is much more accessible as well. Unlike Extinction Agenda, you don't necessarily need to know all the minutia of X-Men continuity. If you just basically know, if you know who Wolverine is, if you know who Magneto is, if you know who Colossus is, then you'll be okay. She does a good enough job of the exposition. Just the whole story is nowhere near as obtuse because it's a much more classic story. I mean, it's a story that turned into the movie. So I think a lot of people by now are familiar with the or understand the concept of an apocalyptic future for mutant kind. So, yeah, this is a good book, and of the two X-Men books, this is definitely the one to read for everybody. This is the more accessible one, and honestly, it's the better one. The art's better, the writing's better. No knock on the other book, but this is the better book, and it's definitely worth a read. And with that, we at last come to a close for this episode of Unrepentant Geeking. Again, I'm sorry for how long it took this to come out. As I've said in other videos, the July reviews will not take nearly as long. Expect those hopefully no later than like August 11th or 12th. I mean, my birthday's coming up on August 8th, so I will probably not be quite as active during that week. We'll see. But still, it won't take nearly as long. There's no E3 or San Diego Comic-Con to get in the way. There's no week-long or month-long stuff to get in the way. August is overall going to be a more chill month. Not that I don't have plenty of stuff for you guys, because I do. But yeah, definitely won't take nearly as long to get the July stuff up. Although there are more books in July since a number of June books got delayed. But don't worry, I'm on top of it. Yes, I'm sure you're all very, very worried. And there probably are less books since I'm only really reviewing issue 1s. I don't know what I'm going to do once we get to the point where there's really no issue 1s and there aren't much last issues. I don't know if there's going to be like an August month of Secret Wars. I may just jump ahead to the end, or we'll see. I'm going to play it by ear. I have to look and see if there are any more number 1s coming, or at least enough number 1s coming in August to justify. Maybe I'll do a check-in. I don't know. I haven't figured that all out yet. We will see. There will be at least one more episode of Unrepentant Geeking looking at Secret Wars. Probably 2, if I had to guess. And I will do wrap-ups on all the series. And, of course, I'm probably going to try and do, like, at least 20 or 30 minutes on the overall series itself once it ends. But that's not going to be until October. So, yeah, probably at least 2 more episodes, though they may not come directly, like these, in the same, in August or even September. We'll see. Regardless, as always, thanks for watching, and I want to once again ask that if you're watching this on iTunes, please rate and review. That really does help the show. If you're watching this on Unrepentant Geeking or on Channel Awesome, please follow the link below to my Patreon at Unrepentant, at patreon.com/unrepentantgeeking. Even a couple bucks a month could be a big help. Just keeping the lights on, letting me do more stuff. Any support you can provide for the show is greatly appreciated. Coming in next week is going to be my review of Pixels. Oh God, I'm going to see it tomorrow, as of this recording, or maybe Saturday. I don't know. I won't have seen it until after this is fully edited and ready to post. So in case it takes me down, in case I fall to the horror that is Pixels, at least you'll have this. And if I do fall, remember me like this: as an enormous geek. I want it known that I died as I lived. A geek. Wow, that got really over the top and melodramatic and a little darker than I'm comfortable with. No, Pixels probably isn't going to kill me, but it may just make me wish I was dead. Also, in the week ahead, next couple weeks, look for reviews of Lost Dimension and Etrian Odyssey Untold 2. Plus, there's some other games in the works. There's some big titles coming at the end of August and in September, and all too soon, the busy time for game reviews will be upon us. But that is in the future. And for now, for Unrepentant Geeking and Channel Awesome, I'm Shaun Cronenfeld, wishing you all long days and pleasant nights. Till next time, everybody.